Well, hey, everybody, and welcome to another episode of Keys to the Shop, where we give you insights, inspiration, and the tools you need to grow as a coffee service professional. My name is Chris DiFirio. I'm your host for the show, and I'm excited to have you here. As always, if you are wanting to learn more about the show, you can go to keystotheshop.com. You can follow us on social media. It's just at Keys to the Shop on LinkedIn, on Instagram. And you can always reach out to me, Chris at keystotheshop.com, if you're interested in coaching and consulting. We do that at Keys to the Shop. In fact, that's how I spend a lot of my time these days, is with coffee shop owners and operators, helping them build great cafes. Now, today's episode is brought to you by our friends over at Arto Brick, at Arto Brick on Instagram. Check them out, as well as the Pacific Barista Series at pacificfoodservice.com. But I'm going to talk to you more about those folks in the later part of today's episode. But right now, I want to introduce you to the topic, which is management. And one of the things that I've kind of long held as a value of management is that managers are leaders, and that leadership in the cafe is most often, if not almost exclusively, demonstrated by managers. And therefore, as a result of this mindset that, yes, a manager is the present authority, they are the person who most likely is seen as representing the values, the vision and mission of the company. And if you have a bad manager, then the whole thing just kind of falls apart, right? There's a lot of pressure, which is why a manager needs to, one, constantly be resourced well by the person who put them in that position, whether that's the general manager or the owner. Having a great relationship and a regular communication and a good amount of resourcing and clarity involved in that relationship helps that manager not only not burn out, but actually thrive in that position. We've got many episodes. You're going to see a lot of those linked in the show notes that I invite you to listen to after you've listened to this one. So that's one. The owners and those who are your bosses, I think they should be resourcing and in trying to do as much as they can to help set a manager up for success. Now, that's not always the case. And you may be a manager or somebody who's been put into a position of leadership where you now are in charge of your own clarity, your own resourcing. You got to somewhat manage up. You've got to almost like go out and hunt down the clarity and the tools you need to do the job that you're told you need to do, but haven't been given the tools to do. That's an unfortunate thing, but it's a blessing in disguise in some ways, because it allows you to develop the resiliency of, I wouldn't say self-sufficiency as much as I would say resourcefulness that allows you to empathize with others that you lead. So, because you had to deal with it yourself, where you were under-resourced, but you had high expectations, that you're not going to do that to other people, right? There's that. But also it allows you to develop a certain strength of character, and that resourcefulness turns into, being proactive. And that's definitely a skill that when you develop that, it is actually very helpful for your career, because the resources you need to do your work well often are not just kind of there in a package given to you, and you can always just at arm's reach grab it. You need to go out and get it. Now, I am definitely not saying to you, if you're an owner, that is some kind of a mark of a good manager that needs to cover up for a lack of resourcing on your end. As we've said before, when I hear people talk about how we need to have a manager who's proactive, or they need to be really resourceful, we need to make sure that that's not us saying because we refuse to be ourselves, because we haven't set them up for success. We actually need those people who work for us to do more because we're not doing enough. It's up to you to decide. I can't tell you if you are or are not doing that, but I've found in my career that actually is very much the case, where we rely upon the resourcefulness of others to get us off the hook for having to resource when it was actually our responsibility. So that said, when we talk about management in the cafe, it's evident that a good manager is somebody who is in process. It is somebody who is not only strong enough to embrace the role of leadership of others, but also embrace the idea that they themselves are in process of becoming the kind of leader that can better lead others. It's higher degrees of imperfection, yes, but it's a process. And so today I wanted to talk about 3 ways that you can become a more effective manager. And if you're not a manager listening to this, but you have managers under you, if you're the owner, this is also a way for you to say, okay, well, these are things I want to help them develop too. What can I do to set them up for success in these areas? The very first thing, and this is kind of coming off the heels of a shift break that we talked about recently, which is that we're not supposed to start managing with the idea of change first. We're supposed to start with learning. And learning helps you understand the context, the dimensions of the vehicle. You're really good at parallel parking only because you understand how big the vehicle is and where the end of that body of the vehicle is in relation to the things around you. That comes with practice, but that's the same thing that happens when it comes to management. When you enter into the world of management, you've got to get a lay of the land. You've got to know how far apart those cars are, and you've got to know yourself well enough to know if that's an impossible task. Can I make that? Is my vehicle too big to fit in that space? What about, am I going to box in the other car? Are they going to have any room to get out? And if you answer negative to those things, then yeah, you might want to find another space, but you have to have assessed that. Now, hopefully you have entered into the world of management having assessed that this place does need a manager. And now, in order to get into this world of leadership in the cafe, you need to know yourself. You have to have what we're going to first talk about here, which is the right view of power and the self-awareness to understand your tendencies under pressure. If what you're going to do in the future of your role is coach people when they are dealing with a long line of people, and they're dealing with coworkers that they feel are not pulling their weight, or whatever challenges you might have as a manager dealing with people, is equally important for you to know how you act under pressure. Your pressure might be different. If you're a manager who doesn't necessarily deal with the rush per se, but you end up having a lot of meetings with staff, there's a certain kind of weariness that a barista at the point of sale reaches that you also might reach, but in a different kind of a way, with lots of meetings, lots of communications, maybe a lot of open loops. You need to understand how you work under pressure in order to be able to plan for being graceful under pressure, to demonstrate the values of the company, even in the midst of the weight of the role itself. And in this case, I'd say self-awareness is a great quality to cultivate, because when you're given the authority to be a manager, in a lot of cases, you have the authority to hire and fire, or at the very least, to coach people and direct their activity in the company under the banner of this brand. You are the one who has the ability and the authority to direct them. That authority warps the way people see you. Stan Slap talks about this in Under the Hood. There's a sign on your forehead that says, "I can fire you," and you're wondering why people are looking at you funny. It's just the nature of what you've entered into now. And in order to be aware of that, you need to have intentionally thought about this. Before you start the day, you need to start thinking about, how am I going to show up? Who am I going to be at work today? Who do people need me to be? What things do I need to do? What do I need to say? Who am I working with, and how do they need to be managed? What is it they need to be managed on, or led? What kind of clarity does my team need from me today to fulfill the mission and the promise of this coffee shop? And it's a big task. Management is no small feat, but it starts with that intentional reflection upon how you enter in, and how you show up is determined on how well you know yourself. So, one of the things in order to have that self awareness is to also be aware of the authority you carry, and the fact that there is a bit of a difference between you and the rest of the people. Not a difference that makes you better, but it's a difference that is just the weight of your words, the weight of your presence, even just the way you look at people. There's a suspicion. Unfortunately, there is a natural suspicion people have towards authority. There's a nervousness. This is one of those issues that I talk about in leadership where my wedding ring on my hand sometimes is I forget about it sometimes. And if I am doing dishes, and my wife does a lot of pottery, and we're very careful with her dishes, right? One of my jobs in the house is dishes. So I have a different way that I do her pottery than the way that I do other dishes. But sometimes if I'm going really fast, I forget my ring is on. And what I'll do is I will just, clank the ring on the dish. And I am freaked out for a second. And I'm like, okay, take the ring off, or, be more careful. Now, that ring basically represents extra weight on my hand. I was used to it. I'm used to that weight, but I didn't account for it when I was dealing with the delicate process of washing that very special dish. So, in leadership, that's kind of what you need to do. Always be aware you've got the ring on. What you might be just kind of going along, doing your thing, but unintentionally, it clanks on something. And you can bemoan the fact that you didn't mean to do it and all this other stuff, but it's up to you to take responsibility for the weight of the thing that you carry on you, that authority. So that's the first thing, is really being aware of the weight you carry, and having the right view of what you do is important as well, because what you do is for others. Just like hospitality, leadership in management is really a hospitality role. It's preparing the ground and preparing the space for the people who work in the space. So in that way, your staff are your customers, and you can create, through the values and tools and standards of the company and the work that the company has set up, the boundaries of that company, policy, everything else. Within that scope, you have the freedom to work well to make them successful and to make the business successful. Because when the business thrives, if you're in an environment where it's a people first environment, especially, we all thrive. That's what we want. So there's a humility here. There's this right view of your authority and power. We always say your power is not for you. It's a tool to use for the benefit of other people. And it's a high calling to be a manager. And that's why having this view is the first thing that will make you successful. Hey everybody, it's Chris, and I wanted to take a moment here to thank our sponsors. First, our sponsor, Arto Brick, at Arto Brick on Instagram. Hard surfaces, tile, stonework. They are doing some amazing work to help your dreams of what a cool looking tile wall, bar surface, floor looks like, because that stuff matters. It really does. They love coffee. They love coffee people. Check them out on Instagram at Arto Brick. If you're building a second cafe, your first cafe, or whatever it is, you're remodeling, this is the kind of company you want to be linked up with to be part of your team in that design effort. So reach out to Armin at Arto Brick on Instagram, DM them and say you heard about them on Keys to the Shop. And today's episode is also brought to you by our friends at the Pacific Food Service Barista Series. PacificFoodService.com is going to take you to the website. You can learn all about their extensive lineup of performance plant-based beverages. You get samples and try it for yourself, and you'll find that it stands up to the heat from steaming, has amazing texture, keeps the balance focused on coffee. Baristas the world over have loved this product for a reason. It's because this company obviously loves baristas, and it creates these things for the professional barista. So check our friends out there again, PacificFoodService.com, if you're looking for the best plant-based beverages for your customers. Now, back to our episode. Now, the other thing that I want to talk about is you need to have patience and empathy, but consistency in your communication, in the way you apply policies and communication. a lot of times what we end up with is well-intentioned short bursts of application of these standards, but then we get really gun shy about it and we don't come back to it for a long time. Like, we tried it out, it didn't work out, it was a little, ooh, it was awkward, and I didn't apply this consistently across the board to everybody in the cafe because I'm very uncomfortable with this, and or it's been so long and I don't, it feels really awkward to bring it back up again, and I really should have been talking to them about their being on time, or I should have been talking to them about the hospitality issue that keeps coming up, about how sometimes they're a little bit rude to customers. And we've had the conversation before, but I never really followed up on it because I got busy. And honestly, I feel a little bit scared. Not like I'm afraid of them per se, but it's a hard conversation, and I have a hard enough job. And the issue here is that it is the admin part. Yeah, it can be hard, but the actual job is not so much the paperwork. It is that person work. It is the people work, not the paperwork, that makes you a manager. And so if you're not having consistent and just like never missed communication rhythms, if you're not applying things consistently and patiently across the whole cafe, and I say patient, I mean we're not building up a certain amount of angst and just like dropping the bomb on somebody because we procrastinated on not bringing it up consistently. That happens a lot. People just kind of build up resentment, and then all of a sudden they have this big old meeting with somebody and it doesn't go well because everyone's emotional and they're relying on their positional authority, and they're like, gosh darn it, you better stop this bull crap right now. And it's never effective. And it's because we haven't actually embraced the idea that it's people work, not paperwork, that makes management and leadership effective, which means you have to have a system for showing up with clear communication, but do it consistently across all the areas of the cafe that it needs to be done in, which means openers, closers, it means all of your staff. And you need to be paying attention to these people and become an expert in the way they are at work. When you do this well, you're going to be doing it empathetically because you're going to be plugged into how it feels to work within the systems that you are managing and leading people through. So that's where the patience comes in. You understand, but you're also not going to let people off the hook because empathy can be toxic at some point where it becomes enablement. That person that finally got fired after it's just been so obvious they've been flouting the law, they've been skirting the policies, and it's like, oh, we can't, and we should, and oh, you finally let them go, and then everyone breathes a sigh of relief. That was a failure of management. It was a failure of leadership. And the issue here now is to start again, start fresh, and say, we are going to enforce our policies, of course, because we believe they're for the good of the people. We are going to do this consistently. We are going to also celebrate people's wins and specifically affirm them across the way. We're not just here to find problems and police people. No, this is more about coaching and celebrating as we grow together. And that's another thing about this patience part, is that you give room for people to develop. We want to see people taking ownership of their roles. Okay, we want to see people embracing the responsibility of their position as a barista or a trainer, whatever they're doing. But we also know that they're not going to be perfect in doing it because we know we're not perfect in doing it. So we're just imperfect together, but we're also going toward a thing. We're getting better together. You're using your authority as a manager and a leader to help them. They're using their will, their emotions, their minds and their body and the work to do the work well, and it all works together. This is what working in the cafe is all about. So patient and empathetic enforcement of policy and consistency of doing that solves so much. It's like preventative maintenance for relationships. And the culture and the relationships of your business are primarily based in the work of the cafe. The culture itself first needs to be based on the work that you do together. And then the other cool, unique aspect of your people and their different tastes and music and art and stuff, that will come later and it will fill in everything else. But if you base it all on that stuff first, and you don't base it on the work, and you don't make it about what you're there to do together, it's going to be really hard to be an effective manager. And so this is the second aspect of being an effective manager out of the three we're talking about today, is this consistent and empathetic enforcement and patience in the process of collective becoming, collective work. And it's kind of a cool thing to see when it's working well. Now, the third and final thing we're going to talk about today, and there's plenty of things we could talk about, but I wanted to keep it to three, is the work of systems. Systems are a form of care. Systems and SOPs and checklists are the physical representations of ideals that we have decided are worth pursuing. You say, I want to have really good coffee at my coffee shop. Well, beautiful. Well, how are you going to do that? That's what becomes a system, an SOP. And those are created effectively the same way you create a coffee bar effectively. Let's say we say this about layouts. If you have a particular menu, a certain number of sizes, varieties of iced drinks, the bar itself needs to be built in such a way that it's very efficient and effective for manifesting that menu, for creating that menu. The way that you build is based on what you want that thing to produce. So the cafe and the experience the customer has, or even the experience a barista has to be using systems that are designed to produce the thing you are going for. So it may be quality coffee. It may be that you want joy in the work that you do behind the bar, so that the customer sees the joy of your staff and it just overflows to the cafe. What a great goal. But how are you going to do that? What kind of checklists do you think, or SOPs and policies do you think need to be in place to consider the very real work that it takes to do that, and all the interconnected pieces? I mean, there's dishes, there's bathrooms, there's stocking and ordering, there's communication, there's tools that we use for communication, there's all the nitty gritty things of the coffee shop that need to be accounted for in order for something as ephemeral, or it might seem that way, as joy to be the product. It's not a bad goal. It's just we need to work backwards from there and say, if that's the end goal, what needs to have been true in a busy shift in order for that to be the product? And sometimes it's helpful to think, well, what happened in order to produce not joy? Oh, well, so and so didn't write in the log the thing that was out. So, right there is a great example. You can create a better way of communication that doesn't allow for as easy of a miss of an inventory item. So, we were advertising that we have the mocha, like the spiced mocha, but we're out of cayenne pepper. Like, how did this happen? Well, somebody didn't write this down or that down. It could be an issue with the par level. Managers need to up the par because it's more popular than we thought. See, when we're thinking about systems as a form of care, we're naturally going to include it in the way that we fulfill our promise to our relationships. Customer, we are going to have this menu item. Here it is. We've done the work. The promise is, the assumption is, we've done the work on the back end to make sure that we're going to have it when you order it, because you saw the ad on Instagram, you came in, you should expect to get it. That's our promise to you. It's implied. Baristas, when you are saying, I can't work at this particular hour of the day. When I was hired, they said that I didn't have to work on Monday evenings. Well, the new manager came in and I'm working on Monday evenings, and I already said that I couldn't work then. Well, the system has broken down because the new manager wasn't trained right, because ownership just thrust them into that position. Maybe they weren't aware of the policy, or they didn't have time to learn as much, or it could be the manager just forgot and needs to work on a system to be able to be fresh on information and clear on their expectations, right? It could be that they're not good at managing and they just shouldn't be a manager. But you can see why systems and policies and these guardrails are there, and they're built to help guide us, because as a collective group of people after the same thing in this company, we need tools to help us toward our goal. We need the goal first, but we need the tools to be developed so that in relationship to each other and to the work, we find harmony, we find clarity, and we stay on target. So as a manager, your role is not only people work, but now because of the people work as your primary thing, it has to include the appropriate paperwork, the appropriate tools to back it up. So it kind of comes full circle. You don't start there. You don't start by downloading a manual from the internet and say, well, this is how we're going to base our entire business, because sometimes that's just it just doesn't fit what you're going for. But you start with those values, the goals, the specific outcomes you want to see, and a deep knowledge of the people you're working with and the people you're serving. And then you say, what systems and tools will serve us as we do this together? And you're a curator of those things. They are living forms of relationship management, and they are part of the role, a manager, and they are part of how you can be a successful manager. So those are 3 things I wanted to mention today. There's other management related topics that we've covered on the show, actually a lot. So I'm going to choose maybe a few to feature on our show notes. You can go to keystotheshop.com and just search, actually, in the search bar for topics that you want to hear about, and it'll pull up either a blog article or a past episode. And if you have questions that are very specific, maybe some challenges that you need to work through, send me an email. Let's reach out. Let's have a conversation. It's chris@keystotheshop.com. If you're interested in coaching and consulting, this is work I do all the time. And we've worked with over 85 different coffee shops and companies in the last 8 years of doing Keys to the Shop consulting. So I would love to have a conversation to see if something fits for what your need is right now. So again, that's chris@keystotheshop.com. So that's it for today's show. I hope that was helpful for you. And just let me know. Reach out and let me know. Let's talk. All right. Thanks, everyone. And I hope that today's episode has truly given you keys to the shop.